Hello and welcome to the Gelatinous Cube Showdown, where I will be testing 4 different types of paint to determine how best to paint a translucent miniature. Our first contestant is Citadel Color Contrast Warp Lightning. The contrast paints by Citadel are very good paints, however they get a pretty significant decrease in points due to the lids. Our second contestant is a relatively new product by Army Painter. It is very similar to the contrast paint made by Citadel, and I have used the product in the past to paint large groups of miniatures. Our third contestant is a light green ink. Ink is typically somewhat translucent, but also contains a large amount of pigment. Our final contestant will be a glaze of livery green created by Vallejo, and I will be diluting it with a glaze medium also created by Vallejo. Before putting any paint on the cube, you will actually apply a thick layer of gloss varnish, which acts to increase the translucency of the plastic as well as granting a slightly better surface for the paint to adhere to. And after all the paint has been applied and dried, you will apply a final layer of gloss varnish. Our first paint will be Citadel Warp Lightning. Hold it by the QRC. Sorry, I'm laughing at my own freaking joke. Yep, so you want to make sure you're not touching the outside. After a brief intermission, I'm ready to talk about cubes again. I applied the contrast medium over all of the objects within the Ring of Death, and I used my finger to wipe off a little bit from the top of the object, allowing the object to be both visible and goopy and disgusting, as something within a gelatinous cube should be. Although, I did learn, after painting all of these, that gelatinous cubes are supposed to be completely clear, which means that they make fantastic traps in dungeons, since they are large enough to fill up an entire hallway but not be noticed, as well as being part liquid, much like cats, and they will fill whatever space you put them in, such as a large sphere with treasure floating in it, or maybe, like my DM did, the bottom of a well in which you have to climb, and you're just thinking, oh, there's some water down there. Let's send the wizard down first, I'm sure he'll be fine. Gelatinous cubes and oozes in general were actually modeled after amoeba, which can expand and contract to move and are goopy, mindless eating machines. Interestingly, they also share some similarities with Roombas, because they will keep whatever dungeon you put them in very clean, simply by oozing and gooping around, absorbing all the dirt and biological material for you. So remember, a clean dungeon is a dangerous dungeon. Now, we are moving on to our next contestant, which is Army Painter Speed Paint Orc Skin. Much like the Citadel contrast paint these speed painters are modeled after, the paint flows off the brush very satisfyingly, and it coats well on this translucent miniature. The paint is, of course, a bit thinner than I usually have my paint, a little bit closer to the consistency of water than I personally like, although a lot of people apply their paint in very thin layers called glazes, which I'll be showing later, over their model, which will eliminate brush strokes and create very nice transitions. This is something that I am admittedly not very good at, but I am working on improving, and we will probably have some videos later on, so maybe we can learn with each other. I should probably note how I am judging these paints. I am judging them based off of how much I enjoy painting with them, how translucent the final product is, and how well the paint initially adheres to the very smooth surface of the cube. This is an important judgment because usually the miniatures that I paint are a lot more textured than these very smooth plastic surfaces. A little bit more about gelatinous cubes. They can only really digest organic materials, which is why you see all of these bones and weapons floating around in the Ring of Death. And as the cube oozes along, it will eventually just kind of spoot out the objects and leave them behind. If I was a wizard, I think that I would want to have a tiny gelatinous cube familiar with just enough intelligence to not try to kill me. And it could just sort of scoot around my laboratory and just pick up all the dust for me. And then it could have like a little corner that it just kind of goops out whatever objects it may pick up. Kind of like a cat or a bunny rabbit, where they always poop in the same spot. And I don't know, maybe it could have a top hat. I'm getting way off topic. Okay, now I am working with the green ink, which is applying very poorly. It's much more runny than the others. That should not be surprising. I just had high hopes that it would work well. But it is a very bright color and more translucent than the other two, I think. We'll have to see at the very end when the final layer of gloss varnish is applied. Another issue I'm having with the ink is it's even harder to handle than the contrast and speed paints, because it is so runny. It's drying very slowly, and I actually had to leave it sitting out overnight for the first layer and ended up applying, I think, one more layer. That's not too bad, but if you are in a bit of a hurry, then it might be an issue. Compared to my previous video, it only took me about an hour to paint all of these minis, if you add them up. I really love how the ink is going over top of Ring of Death. It's just so fluorescent and vibrant. And I especially love how it acts a little bit more like a wash. Okay, on to the livery green. Unfortunately, almost all of my footage was too blurry to actually use, and I apologize for that. Here I am applying the final layer of cursed paint where the cube is oozing a bit. Moving on to our final products here, arranged nicely in a row. Which one is your favorite? Leave a comment letting me know. The ink, speed paint, and contrast all look quite good. They're pretty transparent, and I like them. Now the glaze did not come out so great. It, first of all, is the shade of snot, and secondly, I had a bunch of brush strokes, which is funny because glazing is meant to prevent brush strokes. I guess I'm just not that great at it yet. I am placing my character from the Curse of Strahd campaign. She is a Twilight cleric, if you were wondering. Into the cubes, just so that you can see how much of the model, is still visible while it is in the cube. Unfortunately, I think it doesn't quite get captured by the camera, but both the speed paint and the ink, I think, had the most translucency, with ink being a little bit more translucent than the speed paint. I swear my hands just deactivate sometimes. Is that normal? Okay, now we're on to the most cursed cube. I'm placing my character into the Ring of Snot, and as you can see, it is pretty opaque. You really can't see anything through it. I was gonna try and make it look like any of these could be the winners, but just that one is not. Okay, on to the glamour shots. First here is the Warp Lightning. I think it's a very nice color, it covered well, and is still a little bit translucent. And here is the Orc Skin. It has the same properties essentially, although it is a little bit more translucent. And both the speed paint and the contrast paint were a joy to work with. Now we're on to the green ink. I like the color on this one more, although I can't really judge these based off of color, just because I selected the colors and there are a lot more options. It was also significantly more translucent. I just don't like this cube. It's naughty. Maybe someone would like that. It will still be up for sale on my Etsy page. And here's all 4 of them with their accompanying paint. I will say that I am very pleased with this test. It was a lot of fun, and these models, made by WizKids, I believe, are just really well done and versatile. I think most people use them as dice jails. So, who do you think is the winner? Vote now on your phone. Just kidding, this isn't a democracy. The winner is Speed Paint. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video and maybe even learned something along the way. I will see you next time, where I will be ruining your childhood.